Star Wars Acolyte is changing the direction of the Jedi. The Jedi are now the Empire, but what does that mean for the future? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. Star Wars Acolyte takes place 100 years before The Phantom Menace, and it is a time that is just before the cracks in the foundation of the Jedi Order begin to form, or have just started to form.
I mean, I feel like cracks in the foundation's kind of
been there the whole time, really.
But yeah, it's still more shiny and new, and
yes.
Yeah.
The Jedi Order themselves are in this place where they're at the height. They're towards the top of the power that they've ever had in the history of Star Wars, except maybe for the Knights of the Old Republic, but it's kind of a different power there. This is kind of the era of peace and prosperity. They've gone through the wars of the Knights of the Old Republic era, and time has passed. Time for the Jedi to rebuild and reconstruct what they're known for and how they can kind of just spread throughout the galaxy. Mm-hmm. This is a time frame for them to explore and build.
Yeah. Golden Age in the sense of not much is going on, man. Like it's all good, you know. And
everything's great.
There's no conflict. This is just the fruitful age of just You can tell. You can tell just by this vibe.
They're very much in the mindset of this is how things need to get done, and if they don't get done this way, we're kind of surprised.
Yeah, very protocol oriented.
Yes.
It's giving, well, you feel a lot of like the Republic
yes.
feel. Like just 'cause there's
very much
a way
New
to
Republic.
do things. There's like kind of the social order almost, or like
processes in place. You got to talk to the council.
Yeah.
You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this before you can do that. Mm-hmm. And it's all throughout the era, really. At least what we see in Acolyte, because there was an interview done that the Jedi take out their blade with a very intentional reasoning. Mm-hmm. It is to end the fight. This is a time frame, at least in the Acolyte's perspective, where you're going to fight with the Force. The Force is the thing that you are utilizing as your weapon. Mm-hmm. You're going to try to neutralize the fight without any death or destruction or anything like that. And only when you need to end the fight quickly will you bring out the lightsaber. Or in Yort's case, all the time.
All the time. That's a good character development for him.
Yes.
Yeah, there is this really good and just like a really interesting touch to the Jedi that we just haven't seen before is that extra little like, this is what we do these days.
It's an art form. It's another process that this is what the Jedi are supposed to do. The Jedi are supposed to address things with the Force first and then utilize their weapons. Yep. And only then is it to end the fight. It's not to just like whirl it around.
It makes sense. The Force is such a powerful thing, especially when you can read people's minds and kind of like get a feel for everything in theory.
And a lot of the focus in Star Wars in like the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, maybe not the sequel trilogy tried to play around with the Force, but generally it's all about the lightsabers, and the Force is kind of like the secondary thing that lets you have extra reflexes while you have the lightsaber.
Well, and it makes sense, especially in filmmaking. I mean, that the lightsaber is the flashy thing. It's the thing that
literally,
truly, it's the thing that gets butts in the seats. I mean, I feel like
it's fun to watch. It's fun to play with,
and it's kind of that homage to more of the samurai-esque feel of things. I like, though, that we're going into this more, I don't want to say spiritual, but like more Force-focused style.
It's more of like what Palpatine wanted the Sith to be. Like Palpatine was very much of the mindset that lightsabers are for the weak. If you really had power, it would be portrayed in your ability to utilize the Force. That is true power in Palpatine's perspective. And it comes from around this time frame. Like this would be basically around the time that Palpatine's master, Darth Plagueis, would be around learning these things and eventually pass those on to Palpatine. Much later on, but this would be around the time frame that these foundational beliefs would start. And I think it makes sense for the High Republic era Jedi to be much more focused on the Force. At least the traditional Coruscant Jedi.
Right.
Because as we saw, as you get away from Coruscant, the less rule following you will get, really.
Yeah. I actually love that part about it. It was really interesting. I was very caught off guard by it to be like at a different temple sort of thing, like a different Jedi temple. But then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this just makes so much more sense. Like, this is like, these are the acolytes of the main head Coruscant guys, you know? Like, but it makes, oh man, that's such a great tidbit to like see
it's
these.
your local church.
Exactly. See these, gosh, yeah. And just, it would be a lot less structured because they're dealing with a totally different setting. They're dealing with a much more
small scale politics,
organic thing, you know, like, especially just where they are. It's just so fascinating.
I think it's such a good piece because, like, in the prequel trilogy, we just see the Jedi Temple. That's what we get, and that's the Jedi. And in the Clone Wars show, even this is what it is.
Right.
So I love this like foundational piece of the Jedi Order and their structure is that they would have these outposts, almost like how the Empire had it set up, where the Empire had outposts on these various planets. So I love the symmetry across the centuries, really.
Oh, it's so true. The amount of comparison we can make right now to the Empire and what it became versus what the Jedi are here in Acolyte, it's like, oh, this is real interesting.
I see what you're doing here.
Yeah, we're playing some interesting games here.
And that's their perspective. And that's the feeling that you get as the Jedi are this behemoth. They're this structure. They are the Empire.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, like during this time frame, they are the Empire. There are cultures and planets where they don't necessarily trust the Jedi. They don't believe that the Jedi are there for the good of the community. And that's apparent here.
Yeah. And even just seeing this one temple outside of Coruscant, it makes you think that there's got to be so many different strategies of how these different temples are affecting these planets and these little cultures and things. Like,
well, they even say I wouldn't expect this to be something that Coruscant would be interested in.
Those are some great messages, I think, that are easy to miss in kind of the overall story of what we get in these first 2 episodes anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see what more we get.
I am too. I think there's a lot of potential for this kind of deepening of the lore around the Jedi. I think this is really fascinating to see. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that. I do think that this series so far in the first 2 episodes, the film language is very weird. It feels like, not even just visually or anything like that in terms of like, the costumes are clearly High Republic. They're supposed to be different. I think the designs and the set design are actually really good to have this mix of like, okay, we're older than the prequel trilogy. But also, we're a little bit different, which is what it needs to do. So I don't even think it's that. I just think of how they're telling the story through the visuals is very off. It's a lot of like tiny moment, completely different tiny moment, completely different tiny moment, completely different tiny moment.
Do you have any like specific example of this?
And so in the beginning, we see May's character go through the battle. And then we switch and we see a tiny little vignette of Osha addressing Yord. And then that switches. They say, hey, it was you. And she says, no, it's not. And they're like, okay, get on the prison ship. And then you get a tiny vignette around the prison ship, which lasts only like a few minutes. And then it shifts and it's like it's on Coruscant for a little bit.
True.
To have a tiny vignette. And then it's back onto the planet where she crash landed. A tiny vignette. Back to Coruscant. Tiny vignette again. None of them really have cohesion. It's all just kind of like, well, this thing happens and 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 this thing happens.
And we need all these things to happen so that we can get these characters together. And
exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like
to the second episode.
If I was to offer some criticism or restructuring, I would say I would focus more on May's character to begin with. Have that piece be longer, set up the structure, set up the mythos of her goal, and then switch it over to Osha. I think that would be a much stronger story structure.
There's a lot of fragmentation in the story that doesn't quite work. I think what is lacking is this: we're not compelled to fall in love with any of these characters because we don't get enough time with them.
Exactly. I don't care for the journey that May is on.
Right.
I don't care for the journey that Osha is on.
Right.
Soul, they fleshed out his story more, so I feel like there's stuff there.
Right.
Vanestra, don't care about. I don't have any past experience with her in the books, so I think if you knew the books, you would have some of that attachment. But very odd.
Yeah.
I said on Twitter, not bad, not great, just weird. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it continues. Like, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the same experience from this as with The Mandalorian or as with Andor.
Yeah, I'm not hooked. They still have to convince me for some reason that we need to care about Osha. Especially.
Or just the journey that they're on. Like, okay, she's trying to kill 4 Jedi. She got 2 of them already.
May's trying to kill 4 Jedi.
Yeah, May's trying to kill 4 Jedi.
Yeah.
That's the structure. Okay.
I know. I wish we would focus more on May, honestly, because she is the more interesting. She's the one with a goal. She's the one out here doing the thing. And it does really feel like it is her story.
Yes.
So I do kind of feel like, well,
she's the Acolyte.
Yeah. Why aren't we just focusing on her?
We'll see where it goes in the future. Let us know your thoughts on your expectations around this era, and also what are your thoughts on the show. We'd love to hear it in the comments below. As always, check out our podcast, and may the Force be with you.